Agreement agenda items 4, 5 and 6 recorded by Hansard. Agreed.
Agreed.
Apologies received by Mitchell McLaughlin. Any other apologies? No. Fair members draft minutes pages 5 to 9. Members content their inaccurate record. Agreed. Fair members summary table request pages 11 to 13 of your packs for noting. Okay, moving on to the first briefing on main estimates and budget number 2 bill. Can I refer you to the following documents: the departmental briefing paper on the department's own main estimates position, pages 15 to 25, and the briefing paper on main estimates for all departments and budget number 2 bill NI at pages 26 through to 61 of the pack. Okay, Peter.
Thank you, Chair.
Welcome. Peter, just to start, can we get you to speak to the DFP position first, and then we'll go to questions on that before widening it out to the cross-departmental element of this.
Will you cover the DFP position, Bridget? Yeah. Do you
Morning.
Morning.
I haven't actually prepared a particular opening statement on the DFP position, but effectively what the main estimates is doing for DFP is writing our most recent budget position into the estimates format and then seeking Assembly's approval to that. So the budget would have been set back in 2010 originally and published as part of the main budget 2011 to 15. And then there have been a number of technical exercises and adjustments that have happened over the years up until we arrive at the 14-15 opening position. And that position then is reflected basically in the main estimates.
Just in terms of the successful capital bids by NISRA and NI Direct, that was back in November, and they amounted to £3.3 million.
Yes.
Have these particular projects been completed and within appropriate timescales?
They're on track for completion, I believe, into the 14-15 year, and so we'll be using that money in 14-15 to take those projects forward. There's a number of separate projects within NISRA that's funding all around making sure that we've got the IT capacity behind the statistical services that we provide to continue to provide that service. And on the NI Direct side, again, that's about continuing to develop our online capability in terms of being able to provide a better experience for the public through an online channel.
The graph on page 17 refers to 10.1 million in terms of capital arising from the reprofiling exercise reduction in capital. What was the reason for that, and when did that take place?
There was, I can't remember exactly when the capital reprofiling exercise took place, but when our budget for capital had been set across the 4-year period, it was very heavily end-loaded towards 14-15. So we had a very high allocation in the final year of the budget, and I believe additional capital became available in 13-14, and we were asked whether there were projects that we could bring forward from 14-15 into 13-14. So effectively that 10 million that you see going out of 14-15 was reallocated to us in 13-14 because we were able to spend it in that earlier financial year.
Finally then, given that there doesn't appear to be any provision within the DFP estimate regarding equal pay, how will any settlement of both the PSNI, NIO and civil service retiree issues be funded in 2014-15 if they are so agreed?
The PSNI, NIO one will be a matter for the Department of Justice. In terms of the retirees, we actually, the way that the accounting works in the estimates, we took a provision for that in the 13-14 financial year, and so in the current financial year we don't actually need to seek Assembly approval to that money because we actually sought approval for it in 13-14. It's one of these strange budget technicalities in that we do need DEL budget cover for it, so it will appear in our DEL budget allocation, but we don't actually need estimates cover for it because we're using a provision that we asked for in a previous financial year.
Right. Okay. Members, any questions?
You just on that, Chair. Well, How did you roll that amount forward?
We didn't roll it forward in estimate terms. What we have to do is we have to ask permission for it in the year that we provide for it. So we ask permission from the Assembly in the year that we require the AMI expenditure. We don't then need to re-ask the Assembly's permission to spend it once it moves into the DEL expenditure. So what we will need, apologies, unfortunately I don't make the rules around these issues, and neither do my colleagues, I believe. So I will still need to seek and put aside DEL budget for it, but it won't appear in the estimates because I've already sought Assembly permission to spend it when it was in AMI.
So roll on the day when we get this new system coming in. Very hard to follow, thank you.
Okay, members, moving on to the cross-departmental element of the session. Can you provide the committee with explanations of the changes for each department as set out at Appendix A?
Yes, Chair, we can. And I believe Jeff again is the man with the detail. So, Jeff, will you go through those?
Certainly,
changes?
Chair. I'll run through allocations first.
Members, just for information, this is page 30 of the text.
So I'll restrict myself to maybe the sort of the more significant allocations, sort of over 2 million and over. In terms of DARD of 23.4 million capital allocation there, 2 million of which is for the upgrading of caravan sites at Forest Parks. 3 million is in relation to the Rural Development Programme, Access 1 and 3. 2 million is related to the Agri-Food Strategy Board. And there was then a further £10 million related to the NI-RDP again. There was 2.2 million related to flood alleviation programme as well. In terms of decal, the significant allocation there is 16.1 million of the 16.8 is regional stadia allocation. The resource side of things, there was a small allocation in relation to sports and additional creative learning centre. In terms of DE, there's £75 million allocated to DE in terms of to increase their budget. That was agreed by executive way back in 2011, I understand. On the capital side of things, there's 6 million of the 6.8 is in relation to a community bid. DEL had a significant number of allocations, mostly related to the Economy and Jobs Initiative. Of that 55.8 resource, 21 million is in relation to student fees, the top-up student fees. A further 20 million is relating to NEETs and youth unemployment allocation, and there are a range of further allocations for employment initiatives. First Start 2.7 million, Step Ahead 50 plus 2.1 million, additional undergraduate STEM places 2.6 million, 150 PhD places 2.4 million, and additional funding to support ESF projects of 2.5 million. In terms of their capital allocation, there's 4.7 million in relation to University of Ulster Coleraine Rationalisation Phase 3, 3.3 million to Queen's University, 2.8 million to Stranmillis University for asbestos removal and infrastructure, and a further 1 million for the Southern Regional College in Banbridge. For DETI, the capital allocations, 3.4 million was in relation to tourist development, and 10 million is in relation to Invest in the Agri-Food Loan Scheme, that's FDC allocation. For DFP, I think you've sort of discussed there's a 1.3 million in relation to NISR IT projects, and NI Direct received 2 million in capital. For health, there's a number of significant allocations, 15.5 million for the Children's Hospital, 3 million for the Fire Service Logistics Support Centre, 5 million for Addressing Serious Risks Programme, 3.5 million for Endoscopy Decontamination Unit, Belfast City Hospital, and then a further 5 million for dental and GP practices under FTC. For DOE, the significant allocation in capital is 3 million for heritage-led development. DOJ had a a new IT contract for delivery of Access NI implemented, or will be implemented this year, and that's 2.3 million. For DRD, there's a number of there's a revised asset management unit capital receipts allocation in there. There's 30 of 17 million. There's 30 million for the A8 Belfast to Larne, 2 million for land and compensation costs, 13.6 for the Macrofelt bypass, 11 million for road structural maintenance, 8.1 for the Glarryford A26, 5 million for local transport safety measures and road improvements, and 2.5 million for bus procurement, the completion of the 2013-14 orders. On the resource side of things, there's 7.6 million in relation to the moratorium on increasing car parking charges, and that was a result of the Economy and Jobs Initiative. For DSD, there's 10 million for co-ownership and 7.5 million for affordable home loans, 5.5 million for empty home scheme. On the resource side of things, there's an allocation of 13.7. That's in relation to the social fund transfer from Amy to Dale. The assembly here, the replacement of the building's roof, is that 4.1 allocation on the capital side of things. Moving on to reductions. Significant reductions, there's a capital reprofile in decal of 3.9 million, 6.9 million capital in DE in relation to the recoupment of a United Community bid. There's a budget realignment in Derry of 12.2. That's where the executive took off money in Derry in acknowledgement that there wasn't just as much economic stimulus at that point in time. And a further 7 million on the capital side for the same reason. 2.9 million reduction in relation to asset management unit receipts in DFP, and 8.9 million capital reprofiling. Bridget spoke of that. In DRD, the 19.1 million reduction in relation to asset management receipts, that's putting in more receipts than originally anticipated. There's a reduction of 44.3 million in terms of capital reprofiling. And then a budget realignment of 10 million in resource, and a removal of a capital receipt, or an amendment of a capital receipt for the F5 in capital of 132 million in DRD. DSD, 16.7 million relates to increased asset management unit receipts on the capital side of things. On the resource side of things, there's a reduction of 4.9 million in relation to student fees, and 5 million in relation to the Social Security Agency non-cash costs reduction. From OFM DFM's perspective, there was a 2.1 million reduction in capital due to the capital reprofiling exercise, and 3.1 million in relation to budget realignment exercise. The transfers between the GB and the Republic of Ireland, the significant ones really are reclassification of FE colleges in Dale, which is 27.8 million and 28.1 million added to our budget. The health one, I have to apologise, Chair, that at 17.5 million is actually an allocation rather than a GB ROI. That's my fault for putting it in the wrong column.
Sorry to interrupt. I mean, just in terms of you said about on that previous bit about on the Dell stuff for reclassification.
Yes.
Could you explain that, sorry, a little bit? Because I'm not quite. I can understand how something get reclassified. I'm not sure how it has a GB or Republic of Ireland particular connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Previously, the FE colleges were treated as outside the accounting boundary for the departments, and the ONS have decided that they are to be treated as NDPBs, which means that they come in, and instead of showing a grant that's paid to them, which is what we would have done previously, we have to show their full resource consumption. So we have to show things like depreciation, which is a non-cash cost. We have to show basically everything that they do in terms of pay, how they produce grants out, their income coming in.
How does that impact in terms of transfer with say?
Well, for instance, FE colleges will have significant capital assets, and those capital assets will attract a depreciation charge. Previously we wouldn't have recorded that depreciation charge, but now we have to.
Yeah, but sorry, no, that's
Jeff, I think what you're asking,
I'm answering a different question.
Sorry.
I think what you're asking is how does it impact on the sort of transfer from a GP?
Yeah.
classifications by ONS has to be resource neutral to the executive. So because there's those additional costs now in our budget, we got that additional money from Treasury, or additional budget from Treasury transferred across with the classification. So it doesn't cost us any more. There's no additional budget pressure on us.
But it's not additional spend that we can.
No, I understand.
It's just funding those.
It's a technical.
Those services already going ahead.
I understand that now, yeah. Okay.
So moving on then to the technical transfers. Number of technical transfers, most of which balance to zero across departments. Departments are always kind of moving money to one department or another to cover different costs. The significant ones in there, down at DSD, there's a technical transfer of 129.5 million, which is reflecting the housing benefit moving from our AMI budget into our DEL budget, and a further 5.5 million similar AMI to DEL transfer in resource side of things due to the Northern Ireland Housing Executive reclassification, and a further 6.9 million again an AMI to DEL transfer from on the capital side of things for Northern Ireland Housing Executive reclassification. The remainder are purely technical transfers across departments, and the balance is zero.
Same here.
Thank you, Jeff. Can I ask what, if any, provision has been made in the main estimates for the carry forward of year-end underspends from 13-14 through the budget exchange scheme?
There's been no provision made for that. That's money that's come in to send out, allocated out in June monitoring. So once that money is allocated out to the departments in June monitoring, it'll be reflected in the supplementary estimates in January. But at the moment, it's not sitting in departmental budgets because it hasn't been allocated to the department yet. Okay.
Also, in terms of the 2014-15 cross-departmental position, as set out in the estimates, how will they be affected by any decisions or non-decisions on welfare reform?
Again, that will happen through the monitoring round. So if there's a positive decision on welfare reform, for example, you expect there'll be probably less needed for budget reductions. If there's no decision, Minister's been clear that he will need to put forward a reductions exercise in June monitoring, which will then be affected in departmental spring estimates. So it's a post. It's after the main estimates have been agreed, essentially. Like all other monitoring changes, it's affected in the spring estimates in January.
Will we return to that one later? Any other questions?
Can I just ask, how much money is currently at the centre?
Jeff, I think you have the centre numbers with you?
Certainly.
Are they not included in the pack here anywhere? Makes it more interesting when they're not.
No, these are all departmental spending plans.
Certainly, there are a number of items sitting at the centre for 14-15. Regional rates, £666 million, reflecting the income coming in from regional rates. An overcommitment that's currently sitting at approximately 23.5 million resource and non-ring fence resource, and 17.9 million of ring fence resource. There's an RI interest element of 63.4 million sitting at the centre. EU match funding that hasn't been allocated yet of 3.2 million. 11 million for the social investment fund, 3 million for childcare strategy, 4 million in relation to the Green New Deal, 5 million that was set aside for our passenger duty, a pressure of 4.6 million in relation to student fees for 14-15 sitting at the centre. That's the sort of things that are currently sitting at the centre in resource. For capital, there's RI borrowing sitting at 250 million that we're anticipating to borrow this year. There's a further 50 million in relation to Together Building United Communities that we anticipate to borrow as well. So that takes the total borrowing that we anticipate for this year coming up to £300 million. There's an overcommitment sitting at approximately 36.6 million. There's 15 million sitting for the Social Investment Fund ready to allocate. An unallocated amount of 34.8 million in relation to financial transactions capital. There's 132.8 million negative sitting at the centre in anticipation of reduced requirements coming in from departments as a result of an agreed executive position last year. Those, you will see the adjustments for those in each of the departmental reconciliations within the estimates. That's also reflected in there. There's a further £10 million pressure that we anticipate some EYF from some budget exchange moving from 13-14 into 14-15. And there's £44 million of unallocated borrowing from TBUC, but we can that may be adjusted by Treasury, so we're not it's sitting there at the minute, but it might change before SSEs, and a further then £8 million of EU capital funding that's sitting unallocated at the centre. The total.
There's a fair bit of money in there then, Jeff.
There is, yeah.
Could I just ask you one other point? We did have a ceiling, you remember this ceiling now for flexibility, looking towards the year end, and we also had an overcommitment. How did it actually pan out in the end?
Well, the numbers for provisional outturn aren't exactly finalised yet, but we anticipate that we will be able to, we'll not breach the budget exchange numbers at this moment in time.
Yeah.
Should further information come in, might be a different story.
Yeah.
So no money going back to the Treasury?
Minister will announce the provisional outturn in time with the June monitoring. So once he announced that, we'll get the full picture. We're still working with departments and finalising all the numbers.
So there's a bit of flexibility still there then?
Yes, and we anticipate carrying some money forward into 14-15.
Thank you.
Okay, members. One final question, Peter. We've received correspondence from the Committee for Agriculture and Rural Development in regard to their scrutiny of the Reservoirs Bill. And they've asked a number of questions that they request that we table these questions at this meeting. So I suppose it would be of use if we respond orally and in written form as well in this regard.
Okay.
And they want, if at all possible, for you to ascertain what provisions for financial assistance there will be for reservoir managers and owners. What has been of that has been allowed for in the budget bill and any conditions attached. How much that provision is for. The DARD Committee understands it's £200,000. When the proposed financial assistance should be spent, and any other conditions such as the need for a business case for this funding and a timeline for approvals.
Okay. We will obviously come back in writing then on the detail of that. But I understand there is provision in the estimates for that on page 36, note 3. So if you in the DART section.
Note 2.
Note 2, sorry. I think it's 100,000 it says in here, on page 36. But we can go back in detail, but there is provision in the estimates for that. But we can go back in the detail around the business case requirements now.
Okay, members, have enough?
Obviously we can be, I guess. Yeah.
Just one final question, another final question. On what basis does DFP consider that there's been appropriate consultation with the committee as is required under Standing Order 42.2?
That's obviously a key issue in terms of accelerated passage. Most of the numbers in the estimates and the budget bill reflects back to the 2011-15 budget, of which, of course, there was it's a long time ago now, 3 years ago, but there was extensive consultation at the time. And I think we went around, and Jeff mentioned a number of those exercises have been ongoing since the capital reprofile exercise and the budget realignment exercise. There was consultation with committees at the time around those development proposals. And we've been in front of this committee explaining all of those changes as we went along over the last couple of years. So in that regard, I certainly see that there has been full consultation on all the public expenditure proposals in there.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, members, can I ask if members are content they're now prepared to take a decision on granting accelerated passage to the bill? Happy enough? Put the question that the Committee for Finance and Personnel is satisfied and there's been appropriate consultation with it on the public expenditure proposals contained in the budget number 2 Bill NI 2014 is continued accelerated passage to the bill in accordance with Standing Order 42.2. Agreed? Okay, fair members, the draft letter to the Speaker, which advises on the committee's decision to grant accelerated passage, and this is currently being tabled.
Any standard letter, chairs, usually.
Members content? Can I seek agreement to copy the DFP briefing paper and Annex A to other statutory committees to inform their contributions to the forthcoming supply resolution debate? Agreed?
Agreed.
Moving on then to the general monitoring round, and refer members to the documents. Departmental briefing paper, pages 63 through to 70. Departmental bid, appendix 5, at pages 3 to 4 of your table pack. Can I welcome Bridget back to the meeting, Janice Marinowski. You're both very, very welcome. Do you want to make an opening statement before we go into questions?
Okay, thanks, Chair. You'll see, obviously, that we're submitting a bid at this monitoring round. This is to enable us to take forward the elements of the Executive's asset management strategy that DFP has been tasked with delivering. So we're asking for some £3.6 million of running costs. That will be to set up a team for collaborative procurement and also to undertake the reform of property management and some survey work that we need to inform the property programme. But obviously the largest element of this bid is 40 million of capital that we're seeking, and this is to enable us to take advantage of some investor save opportunities on the property side of things. We've identified a number of potential opportunities, or perhaps I should give credit where credit's due to our colleagues in the Strategic Investment Board, who have identified a number of potential opportunities on this front that would enable us to deliver long-term resource savings, but would need upfront capital investment. I should probably at this time sound a note of caution in that it's possible that some of the plans that we've identified may not come to fruition. So there will be a risk with this funding that we will need to return some of it later in the financial year, and I would just want to be upfront with the committee about that. But I think the key thing to bear in mind, though, is that if we don't obtain the funding, we won't actually be able to do any of these plans, so we need the funding in place in order to enable us to make progress on them. So I'm comfortable that the list of savings is long enough. That 40 million appears like a reasonable amount of money that we may be able to achieve in the current financial year, and it's on that basis that I'm putting that bid forward. So I'm happy to take questions either on the bid or on any other aspects of the paper.
Just in terms of the 3.6 and 40 million current and capital bids respectively, how much in savings will be directly attributable to those bids?
We can't. Plans haven't been 100% firmed up yet, so in terms of the capital bid, what we'll be doing is we'll be looking at a series of proposals and assessing whether the net present value of those proposals is suitable to justify the investment. So each of the opportunities will be subject to further appraisal to ensure that we assure ourselves that the rate of return on that investment is delivering sufficient savings to justify the capital up front. A lot of those we're looking at around about a 3 to 5% return on some of the potential investments, we think, but we're still in the very early stages of developing business cases for those.
But should they not be done before you make the bid?
We need to have, as part of the business case process, we need to confirm that the bid is that there's affordability there. So without having funding in place, the business case can't be approved. So we're sort of taking the two things forward in tandem. As I say, we've actually got a list of potential opportunities that total around about 100 million. So I'm comfortable that sufficient of those will provide us. You know, the initial assessment has shown that the rates of return are likely to be of an order that would be attractive to us. So at this stage,
what is that range?
I don't know for certain, but they are. I haven't got the exact figures with me, but they are around about 3 to 5% rates of return on those opportunities.
What is that in actual money?
It effectively, sorry.
What is that in terms of
money?
Actual.
And again, I don't have the exact financial figures with me, but I mean, a lot of the programmes are returning savings of a couple of £1 million a year. So, you know, there are substantial savings from them. So, as I say, there's a number of different opportunities that we're working up, but certainly I can provide you with some further financial details on the sorts of ranges of savings that we're looking at. I don't want to be too specific on the opportunities. Obviously, there's some commercial sensitivities around some of them, and it will depend on people being willing to enter into deals with us.
But, you know, in terms of the bids going forward, I mean, if there's bids coming from other departments, which of course there will be, and they have business case, they can set out the rationale, and if there is any potential savings in terms of their particular bids. I mean, it seems to me the department's going forward with bids without even a range of what the savings are going to be. So you seem to be putting the cart before the horse in this respect.
Well, as I say, that there's an element of needing to know that we have the funding before we can enter into negotiations, because I mean we're potentially going to be entering into negotiations with people to do commercial deals, and our problem is that we can't do that without having the funding behind us, because there's an element of them needing to have that there to take us seriously. So the reason, I suppose, that we're coming forward in June monitoring is we know that we have these opportunities available to us, but what I wouldn't want to be doing would be to be asking for this funding later in the year when I know that there'll be no opportunity. If some of those deals don't come to fruition, there'd be no opportunity to hand the money back to be spent in another way that would be more productive, given that we then would know that those deals are not going to happen. Probably not expressing that very well.
Mm-hmm.
But
even if you were to give us a range, I understand sometimes you have to take risks.
Yes.
In these situations, you know, something's been raised.
Yeah, and I can certainly write to you and provide you with.
If you are taking a risk, can you give us some sense of what the possible return can be?
Yeah, and I'm certainly happy to. I haven't got that information with me today, but I can certainly provide that to you.
Do we get that before next week?
Yes, I think that should be possible, yes.
Chair, just on that, you mentioned the risk of some money going back.
Yes.
Could we have that detail as well as part of the overall risk?
Yes, certainly. I mean, as I say, I've got a list of potential projects that total 100 million. I'm asking for 40 million. So I'm already saying, well, it's obvious we're not trying to do everything. It will only be as time moves on that we see. First of all, we have to confirm that the business cases stack up, that our initial analysis is confirmed by a detailed business case, and then we have to enter negotiations. So, I mean, it may be, for example, if we have an opportunity to buy a property, somebody else may offer more money than we're prepared to offer for that property. So it will only be at that point in time when we get through those negotiations that we'll actually understand fully the extent of the risk of that money coming back. So it's not possible to give you a quantified idea of what might not happen at this stage. What I can say, as I say, is we've got a list of projects that total 100 million, and we're sort of banking on 40 million of them coming to fruition. So we're already saying, well, we anticipate that not all of this is going to happen. Let's take a reasonable cut at what might be achievable. And we've cut that down to the 40 million.
That's part of a risk calculation, isn't it?
It is. It's part.
You have that bit as well, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Adrian?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I'm first to say, you know, it was high up the agenda for back 3 years ago, but it seemed to slip off the agenda, so I'm glad it's back in there again. It's coming to fruition. But you said there's a list of about 100 projects.
It's £100 million
£100 million worth of projects. Well, can you give us a flavour of any of them projects, you know what I mean?
A lot of, as I say, they're all on the properties side, so we've identified a number of opportunities where we might be able to buy out of existing leases that we have, so where we would make an offer to the landlord for the purchase of a building that we're currently leasing, and so we have a list of potential buildings that we could do that with, and we've also been looking at some of our PFI contracts as to whether there are opportunities to provide some more upfront capital into those that would then reduce the unitary charges going forward.
Yeah, Chairman, is there not an opportunity here as well that some of the buildings that the department does actually own move? Like, I'm thinking about the County Hall in Cornhill. There's a lot of staff being taken out of there, and the building's going to be sitting 3/4 empty. Is there not an opportunity there as part of the invest to see if they move others into that building?
Possibly, yes, and I know that my colleagues in Properties Division will be considering that. I mean, they would be constantly looking at where our empty properties are. One of the things that they may seek to do, and this will obviously depend on it would depend on what we anticipate the accommodation needs to be in the Coleraine area, but they may seek to do some refurbishment of the building before they would seek to move people in. We are constantly seeking to create higher density in our accommodation, so to refurbish them to more open plan buildings so that we can actually provide reasonable accommodation for more people within the same square footage area.
Yeah, but this is something actually you're going to be looking at as part of this whole Invest to Save thing.
Yes, and we already are. I mean, the only reason I've not mentioned any refurbishment projects in that list of projects is that's one of the main priorities for our existing capital allocation. So we're already this year, we're taking on a major refurbishment of Adelaide House along those lines, so that that building will be refurbished in order to enable us to have a higher density of occupancy, and that will then enable us to release some leases this year as they come up for renewal, instead of needing to take those out again.
Thanks, Chair.
You just on that, Chair, have you taken any account in the budgets about the introduction of flexible working?
We have the Properties Division work to a policy at the moment, I think, of no more than 1-to-1, so 1 desk per person. Now, as and when flexible working would potentially increase, we would be looking at a lower density than 1-to-1. But at the moment, in recognition of the fact that there could be part-time workers who maybe would be using. Somebody would be using a desk 2 days a week and somebody else would be using it 3 days a week, so there would be account taken of that sort of thing as well.
It's the opposite side to what we were just talking about, of course. For the utilisation of buildings.
Yes, well, I suppose you would hope that if you have a greater use of flexible working, that you would have less need for accommodation. So if you combine less need for accommodation with more densely populated buildings, hopefully that's a twofold reduction in the area that you require, hopefully.
Be interesting to see what happens.
Yes, it will. But I mean, it's been a very successful programme. I mean, you will have seen from the DFP Savings Delivery Plan, and I'm probably jumping ahead a few weeks to another session, that we have driven significant savings through reducing the volume of our accommodation over the last 2 budget periods. So for the last 7 years, we have been driving down the cost of providing accommodation. Obviously in recognition that we'd rather be spending that money on frontline services.
Okay, Deputy Chair.
Thanks. Good morning. The bid that you're making to advance the work of the asset management strategy, you say in your paper that the bid will enable the executive to progress key aspects of its asset management strategy. Can you tell us in particular what the key aspects are?
Okay. One of the key aspects is what I've just talked about in terms of increasing the density of accommodation and thereby releasing leases. Also, the other key aspect is the collaborative procurement side of things, and this is where we're seeking to make the best use of our buying power by negotiating contracts on a cross-public sector basis. And thereby driving prices down. I mean, one example, there's been a couple of successful examples that we've achieved already to date on those in terms of the 14-15 electricity contract, and also we've recently let a contract for the provision of security guarding across a wide range of public sector buildings, and those between them have achieved savings of just over £1.8 million a year, just with the first 2 contracts. So our Central Procurement Directorate has a programme of work to take forward to continue to realise savings such as those, and those will accrue not just to DFP but to all of the public sector bodies that obviously are participating in those contracts.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members. Bridget, can I just ask, in terms of just requirements, the department has advised the committee that 2.4 million needs to be surrendered to meet the costs of non-delivery of welfare reform. Is this something that's going to be played out in other departments then as well, and is that currently being relayed to other committees as we speak?
Well, our minister had written to his executive colleagues in March advising that unless there's progress on welfare reform, that the June monitoring round will require reductions of 1.5% across all departments. Now, that's obviously a matter for the executive to decide, so to a certain extent I'm anticipating the will of the executive a little bit by including it in this paper. But I think really it's to illustrate for yourselves that that's obviously something I've had to take into account when I'm looking at the department's June monitoring position. I couldn't really go into this monitoring round planning to still have that money when when the executive may in fact take that decision for it to be removed. So that's why that has been included. But yes, I suppose in answer to your question, it depends on how other departments have chosen to present it to their committees. I may, in fact, be jumping the gun a little bit by showing it in our position to yourselves because, as I think Jeff or Peter had said, it hasn't actually been decided yet, but it has obviously been factored into my thinking for our June position.
And how was the 1.5% calculated?
That would have been. I'm assuming my minister would have taken the advice of my colleagues from Directorate on that matter.
Mm-hmm. Obviously there's going to be ongoing discussion about this particular issue, and in terms of the estimates that lead to these particular cuts across departments, I think the committee would be interested to see how it was worked out, not just in terms of whether Treasury said that this is the cuts that are required, but in terms of why that's required, in terms of the IT system argument, for example, what the argument in terms of the cost of that is actually based on, in terms of actual systems rather than just estimates.
Right. That, again, I'm afraid would be a question for my colleagues in Public Spending Directorate. I can certainly take that back and ask them to provide you with some information.
Okay. That's all right. Okay, members?
Yep.
All right, thank you very much. Members, moving on to the next briefing on renewable energy and public sector buildings. I remind members this briefing has been requested to inform the committee ahead of a potential plenary debate, and that will be jointly sponsored by ETA, OTM, DFM and Finance committees. I advise members that this session has been scheduled in the committee work programme and notified to the department since the 9th of April. However, the briefing paper was only received on Tuesday and had to be tabled for your information today. So can I welcome to the meeting Jim McCreesh, Head of Office Estates, and Susan Dornan from Building Standards within the Department of Finance and Personnel. Jim, just in regard to that matter, I've received some information in terms of the background. Committee office staff have been liaising with DFP staff to obtain this paper in time for packs to be issued on Thursday the 22nd. It did not arrive. DFP officials informed committee staff on the Wednesday 21st of May that the paper had not been cleared and would not be cleared in time for the 22nd of May. But rather would be cleared on Tuesday the 27th of May, obviously a day before the committee meeting. And now obviously the guidance for interaction between Assembly committees and departments sets out the agreed timescales for the provision of papers to the committee as no later than 5 working days before an actual briefing. So therefore the paper for this session should have been with the committee office on Tuesday the 20th of May, and this guidance has been agreed by the executive and the chairperson's liaison group since March 2011. I'm concerned, and I'm not sort of putting all this on your shoulders, but this has been an ongoing issue in terms of the department and committee, and I'm just worried that the department is not treating the committee with appropriate respect in regard to papers, not only for this session but for others.
Well, all I can do is apologise for the delay, and I can assure you that there's that I'll take that message back to the department and to ensure in future papers are delivered in a timely manner.
When was the paper sent to the Minister for clearance?
I don't have that information with me, but I mean it goes backwards, and there's various drafts that are done for it.
Okay, so it was only cleared by the Minister on Tuesday?
Tuesday, I believe, yeah.
Okay, so was it sat in with him for a week or 2 weeks? Or?
I don't have the information with me.
I'm concerned because in the absence of that information, members may be left to wonder whether the Minister is leaving these papers on his desk for a considerable period of time and not treating them with respect and treating this committee with respect. So it would be useful if the committee could have that information as to when officials are providing these papers to the Minister and how long he is sitting on them. Because quite frankly, in terms of our message to the Department, not solely to yourselves, it is not good enough. Do you want to just make a brief opening statement?
Okay, make a brief opening statement. I have a note here that you have a busy agenda, but you seem to be getting through it very quickly. But if you can give a brief summary of the information contained in the paper previously issued to the committee, and then I'd be more than happy. We'll be more than happy to take questions. My name is Jim McCreash, and I'm responsible for the Northern Ireland Civil Service Office Estate. I'm joined by my colleague here, Susan Dornan, who has responsibilities for building regulations. We are both from the Department's Properties Division. The DFP's responsibilities in relation to renewable energy in the public sector can be usually broken down into two main areas. The NICS Office Estate, and in relation to building regulations and the Energy Performance of Building Directive. With respect to the NICS Office Estate, the energy consumption in the office estate equates to around about 4% of the total Northern Ireland public sector estate. You will recall that the Department produced a 3-year energy efficiency plan for its office estate covering the period 2011 to 2014. This had a target reduction of around 10% over the 3-year period and covered 3 main areas. The first area was the reduction in the footprint of the estate, where we estimated we could make savings of just under 4%. I think my colleague Bridget Worth alluded to the fact about the reductions, increasing the density in the estate, and that would be bring about a reduction in the overall footprint of the estate. Also, capital investments in energy efficiency, where we estimated we could save about 1%. And behavioural changes in staff occupying the buildings, where we estimated we could save around about the 5% mark. The final energy consumption figures for this period will not be fully analysed until later this year, as they covered up to the end of March of 2014. However, based on the performance over the first 2 years, we would be reasonably confident that the 10% reduction will have been achieved. We are currently finalising a 3-year follow-on plan covering the period 2014 to 2017. The target reduction has yet to be finalised, but it's likely to be in the order of about 5 to 7%. That's 5 and 7% on top of the 10% that we've already saved in the last 3 years. The investment in the renewable technology is considered only after cost-effective investments in building fabric, ventilation, heating and lighting systems have been incorporated. Our experience to date with renewable energy sources such as the biomass, solar thermal and photovoltaic would indicate that such technologies as currently available are not particularly suited to an office estate environment, as they do not provide cost-effective solutions. In particular, in the solar thermal, the payback period is excessive, greater than the life of the equipment, and we have found there are operational problems with the equipment. With the photovoltaic, whilst there have not really been any operational issues, the payback period is also high, and until there's either a significant reduction in the associated capital cost or a significant increase in the associated displaced grid electricity costs, this technology won't be pursued. DFP will continue, however, to follow progress as renewable technologies develop, and will assess future installation opportunities to both new acquisitions, refurbishments and when additional funding is available. The last one, technology that we would have had in our estate is the biomass boilers. And again, this technology is not suited for an office environment. It's best suited where there's a 24/7 load. But in an office environment where you're 8 to 6, then the equipment is being switched on and off, which is not efficient. In relation to the building regulations, the Department is empowered under Article 4 of the Building Regulations Order 1979 to make building regulations. And the building regulations set the requirements and standards that can reasonably be attained for buildings, including further conservation of power and fuel. The recent changes to Part 5 in February of this year encourages the use of high-energy alternative energy systems without mandating them. At this point, I'll stop. I mean, that's just a brief summary, and welcome any questions.
Thanks very much, Jim.
Okay.
How do you respond to the argument that there's an inconsistency in that the DFP make building regulations for the general public which encourage the use of high efficiency alternative energy systems, yet in regard to the department itself it has no plans to install renewable technologies in the NACS office estate? So there's this great message coming from the department that in terms of building regs, that this needs to be integrated and it needs to be encouraged, and there seems to be leadership in that regard. But in terms of their own backyard, they're not doing anything, you know.
Well, and thinking of the last one there in the biomass boilers, certainly in a domestic environment, a biomass boiler may be more suitable technology, because there's a constant load, there's somebody in the building all the time. So, and in terms of the solar thermal, we have found in our experience in the buildings, because we have a small footprint, that they're not cost effective in terms of how much it would cost to put in to get out. Now that may change over time as the technology changes and as the capital costs reduce, but certainly in those areas we wouldn't be pursuing them. There are the small PV units that you see maybe outside a building for small lights and signs and things like that, but on a large scale we wouldn't be introducing them on our estate.
How do we compare to other jurisdictions within these islands? Are they all facing the same problems, or are these unique to the local market?
Well, I don't have firm information on it, but anecdotal information in discussion with them is that they would have similar issues, and a lot has to do with the cost of the equipment. I think in general, when you're considering a new build, that is the time to, obviously, it's the most cost-effective time to incorporate or to consider renewable technologies. The retrofit can be quite expensive. And thinking in terms of, for example, the PV panels, you have to put them onto a roof. It may not just be the cost of the PV panels themselves, it would be the cost of actually replacing the roof, because the roof wouldn't have been designed to carry the load or the weight of the panels.
In terms of, I mean, you said about new build, I mean, and also retrofit, I mean, in terms of the relocation of DARD staff, is there an opportunity there in terms of Ballykelly to, retrofit the existing buildings to showcase what can be done?
Yeah, I think the DARD proposal goes ahead. The site, I think, will be fully investigated in terms of PV, solar panels, and other technologies. And I think although I've indicated to you we're not pursuing, it isn't a case that we ignore. We do consider it on a site-by-site basis, but our experience to date would indicate that we wouldn't want to mislead people into thinking that we would be putting these into all new buildings.
In terms of wind turbines, there's no reference to that throughout the rest of the background paper. Is that something that is still being progressed? I mean, obviously you have the large wind turbine at Antrim Hospital. What kind of return are we getting in regard to wind technology, and is it still being rolled out in terms of new capital build?
Well, we certainly don't have any at the moment, but wind turbines would be, they are quite capital intensive. We don't currently have any plans to install within the estate. The particular one that you're talking about, I think, was at the Antrim Hospital, was partly funded by the department through through a section of the department that was funding those type of technologies a number of years ago, and certainly the funding on that particular scheme, I think, has ended. And without that funding, I don't think that project would have gone ahead.
But is there no opportunities in terms of wind technology? You know, if you take parts of the estate that are located in wind-intensive areas, and of course, this part of Ireland and indeed Scotland, some of the best wind resource in Europe. So is it not something that the department should be leading on?
Well, we did carry out an analysis of part of our estate. I mean, although we have buildings throughout Northern Ireland, but most of half of our buildings we own and the other half we lease. So in the buildings that we own, a lot of them are concentrated around the Belfast area. The areas that you're talking about, I think that you would be talking about, we don't necessarily have office accommodation there.
Any other members? Leslie?
Yeah, thank you for that. I find it a bit incongruous that you know, we're on the face of it, we're sort of expounding the virtues of green energy, and yet your own experience is that it doesn't actually pay back in sufficient time. Do you have any figures on the likely payback that your calculations have been, or what they should be, if you a benefit?
Well, certainly on the solar thermal, the payback period that we were calculating was in the order of 100 years, and on the PV, based on the costs, we were around about 50. Yeah. Now, I think it would be fair to say that I would expect the payback periods will come down as the technology improves. That's why I'm saying we will keep it up. We will be keeping it under review. In fact, the PV would be, I think, is the one that has the most potential. Now, in a lot of cases, if there was capital grants available, that would in terms of the cost of the individual, would reduce significantly.
What was the payback on photovoltaic?
The photovoltaic payback period was 50 years on our sites. Yeah.
Okay. What about geothermal? You haven't mentioned it.
No, I haven't. We haven't. I'm not aware of any of the geothermal that we were installing. The only three that we have been involved with have been the solar thermal, the PV, and the biomass. I think we do consider them. But I don't have any figures for them.
You actually haven't done an example?
I'm not aware of any geothermal that we might have in our estate.
Everyone else manages to do it in Europe. Hopefully there is.
Well,
but just on that point, it's more the heat pump idea as opposed to just using it for geothermal. It's air. I know some of the hospitals have now introduced it as part of their scheme. The M&E that's mounted on the roof is actually heat to heat air transfer, doing compressors on that basis. So is there any way that we can identify whether or not that's more efficient than using the boiler services that a lot of hospitals were heated with previously?
Yeah, well, what I would say is that we look at those for a new build. Look at all options. I mean, we don't rule anything out and we don't rule anything in. You're referring to as a retrofit,
yes.
And we currently don't have any plans to do any retrofit for heat pumps, and I don't have any information here to indicate what the payback period would be for them. But I can find it out for you. Because we would have considered it for I'm sure, for some of our buildings. And report back. Thank you.
just in terms of EU targets for reducing carbon emissions from buildings, what progress has the executive made in regard to those, and to what extent can those be met by energy efficiency measures within the department?
Well,
is that something we should be concerned about?
Well, in terms of, I indicated, for our state, we represent 4% of the total energy. So yeah. It is, in terms of the overall contribution, it's small. I mean, I've outlined there the areas where we are looking at, and it's really to reduce our energy. We believe if we reduce our energy, we'll reduce our carbon, the amount of carbon that we produce.
What are the EU targets?
I don't have them just at hand here in terms of for the executive as a whole. I think that was set out in the OFM DFM sustainability document.
But has the department, given the department's responsible for building regulations, and some might argue that the department should be setting an example in regard to this, has the department been given an indication at executive-wide level of what target you should be meeting as a department?
Well, perhaps I can ask my colleague maybe to give a wee bit more
Can I just maybe give members
building
a bit of
regulations.
an overview regarding the building regulations and where we are with Part F and CO2 emissions? As you know, Northern Ireland generally keeps in parallel with what's happening in England. The changes in Part F are to do with conservation of fuel and power. So over the last number of years, there's been a reduction in the CO2 emissions from buildings. That's gone from about 40% in 2006. There was another 25% in 2012. Now that downward ratcheting, if you like, is continuing. So there's going to be a continual pressure on buildings and non-dwellings in the coming years. In terms of what's recently happened in England, Part L, you may be aware that they've recently brought in a change in April. Now that change is based on the zero carbon homes approach that they're taking in England. Now what that means is that there is basically they are regulating, if you like, or the policy is for a change in the fabric energy efficiency of the building. In other words, the longest lasting part of the building is where you're going to make the most savings. So that's obviously where you would do your changes first of all. Increase the standard for your fabric of your building. On top of that, there is going to be a carbon compliance target, which is in kilograms of CO2 emissions basically. And then on top of that, the intent is to have an allowable solution, because there is a recognition that with the best will in the world, you cannot offset all of the carbon emissions on a building. It may not necessarily be the right site, the right location. It may be a flat within an apartment block. There are lots of reasons why it may not be able to do that. So that change has recently come in England. Not the allowable solutions. Now that went out to consultation, I think, in October of last year. They're still looking at that to see how that would work in practice. In terms of building regs in Northern Ireland, we will be bringing forward a similar change to what's recently been brought in April in England, and that's due to come in probably about October of next year. So that will reflect the change which has just been introduced in England. It'll be an additional 6% decrease on carbon dioxide emissions for dwellings, and I think it's 9% for non-dwellings. So in that route, using that route of building regulations, there is a continual tightening down of emissions, and hopefully also an increase in the energy performance of buildings. I think members would also need to be aware that the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive recast, which I think was 2010, it has a requirement for buildings to be nearly zero energy buildings, and they have set dates in, I think it's 31st of December 2018. From that date, buildings which are owned and occupied by public needs to be nearly zero energy. Now, as you can imagine, this is causing considerable debate. It is not going to be an easy target to reach, but because we are following along the similar lines to England, they're going down the zero carbon route, and they are hoping that their definition of zero carbon will assist in that movement towards nearly zero energy buildings. So that's the broader picture towards 2018-2020.
But that will be only for new buildings?
New buildings and where there had been like a major renovation.
Right. So in other words, departments will decide not to do major renovations, everything will be minor?
I don't think they're going to have that choice, though, really.
Yeah.
It's, and the other thing I would say is that, yes, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, as you know, there was a recast done of that directive, and members here were very helpful to ourselves in January, February time when we came along and asked for assistance in getting a piece of legislation through very quickly. And I appreciate your assistance in that matter. We don't actually know if we have managed to avoid that EU infraction or not, but we are very hopeful. But it is highly likely that the European Commission will probably bring out another, probably a more tightened version of the recast directive as we move ahead. So it's not going to get any easier looking ahead, but the department certainly is mindful of the changes that we need to be doing now to head towards the 2018-2020 target.
Is it?
Yes, I'm intrigued by the two of you. One saying, aspiring, okay, to slavishly follow Europe, which is another issue that probably we can discuss on another day. But there has to be a reality check in here to limit to what you actually can achieve. For example, it's impossible to have a zero carbon dioxide building. Do you accept that?
What I accept is that in England, they have also accepted that, I believe, in terms of this triangle. I don't know if you're aware of the sort of the carbon triangle they're talking about.
Yes, I've seen that as a theory.
But the realisation is there that you cannot meet zero carbon in a number.
Do you know one of the main reasons why you can't do it?
Well, perhaps you could enlighten me.
People breathe out carbon dioxide.
Exactly.
You know, so unless you're going to come up with some regulation to say, look, you have to stop breathing, you know, for half an hour a day. You know, there has to be a reality check, you know, and really, it's getting near the ultimate stage now, you know.
But perhaps maybe we shouldn't be looking at the carbon dioxide emissions so much as the energy performance of the building.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
If I was a taxpayer, I would be interested in having the fabric of whatever new dwelling I might have being as energy efficient as possible.
You not pay tax.
That's why I'd be very interested in terms of what regulations are coming in. But as a taxpayer, I'd be interested in having the fabric of the building being as high as it could be, being cost effective, being feasible. And then, from the research that's been done in England, it would appear that the better the energy efficiency of your fabric of the building, the more reasonable the payback period becomes then for renewables. I take it that as part of the reason why that approach is being taken in England. They've done a lot of research, and what they've found is that in some cases, the energy efficiency and the CO2 emissions targets were being met by perhaps not having such a great fabric to the building, but then perhaps putting in some sort of biomass boiler type thing. So you could meet your CO2 emissions. The building, well, how long is a biomass boiler going to last for in terms of maintenance and servicing and so forth? The change towards a triangular approach with two separate targets, one for the fabric, one for the total CO2 emissions, will hopefully drive that away from that particular approach, so the actual fabric will be improved, the best part of the building, which should be there the longest, and then the renewables should become more effective, more cost effective.
Okay, members, any other questions on that? No. Learn something new every day, don't you? Just one final question. In terms of the Sustainable Development Implementation Plan 2011 to 14, it has an objective for DFP to produce an energy efficiency action plan for the Government Office of State, detailing targets of energy efficiency, carbon reduction measures that are achievable within budget during the 11-14 period. Just what progress has been made specifically in regard to that?
Well, that's what I was referring to earlier on. We haven't got the information in for this year, but the information we would have to date would indicate that we are going to achieve our 10% reduction.
Okay. And in terms of what you were referring to, Susan, about the targets 2018-2020, how confident are you that we're going to get there?
I think I would be content with our rolling programme if we can make the changes coming in October. That's not just a single change, by the way. That's a group of changes to the building regs and the various guidance documents. So it's not a single. It's not just focused on fuel and conservation of power. I think if we continue in the parallel with what we're trying to do with England, I think we will undoubtedly be in a better position to reach this nearly zero energy buildings. But there is a lot of controversy over nearly zero energy buildings, and the Commission recognises that. There's a lot of work being done on it. And there's also a slight issue regarding the cost optimal approach, which the new recast directive brought in. Basically what it's saying is that there needs to be it's like if you take it this way, it's the difference between what your minimum energy performance of your buildings are at the moment set out in the building regs, and then it's looking at the costs over the time period of which the house is or the dwelling is or whatever it might happen to be, and then looking to see how cost effective that is and where's the optimal point along a cost effective curve. And there seems to be, from the research and background reading I've been doing, there seems to be a slight disparity there. So we are doing our very best at the moment as the department moves ahead. These are going to be difficult targets, I think, to try to achieve. But as I say, I cannot see the Commission moving backwards I think it will continue to tighten on the buildings and the energy performance of buildings. And because of the emissions and the energy which comes there, like 40% of the energy in energy terms across all the different sectors, that's where the focus is going to be, and we will strive to do our very best to meet those targets.
I mean, you referred to the targets in England and the developments there. In terms of the rest of the European Union, I mean, is the likes of Germany already there in terms of some of these targets?
Well, in some cases they are. Like if you look at like Copenhagen and Denmark, for example, they have got a district heating system. But in terms of how they did that was that they insisted that all members in that particular town signed up to the district heating system, so you had no choice. Now, I'm not quite sure how that will go down here. And I think there was one district heating system maybe in Lisbon, from what I gather from my research, but I don't know if it's continuing to operate or not. I don't know. So there is going to... Sorry?
One in Sheffield, which is a prime example.
Okay.
Total energy.
Thank you.
To be one of the new Mosley.
Do you just want to ask a question? Could I ask you, I mean, in all these calculations, I know we tend to make it an exact science, which I don't believe it is. What sort of credence have you given to global warming in those calculations?
Well, I haven't done any calculations, so I can't say that. But what I can say is that the Department of Communities and Local Government have got a research budget, so they are looking at because they are answering in terms of the member state, in terms of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. So it's for them to do the calculations, write the reports. I think from some information I'd read on there's a Zero Carbon Hub website, which gives a lot of good background information, and they are helping to inform government in England about the zero carbon homes, and they're going to extend that perhaps to non-domestic dwellings as well.
But do you accept that if there is global warming, we're not going to need the same amount of energy to heat our homes?
What I would love to say is if I could take Northern Ireland and move it to Ecuador, I'd be very happy because we have a higher temperature.
But then you would need cooling system.
Well, actually, in the place I would recommend in Ecuador would be a place called Cuenca, which is 8,000 feet up. Beautiful temperature, blue skies. I'd highly recommend it.
Maybe the committee should take a look at this place.
We'll go and have a look at it. I'll approach you.
Okay, members. Jim, Susan, thank you both very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members, can seek agreement to copy the DFP paper to the ETA committee for information.
Yes, great.
And also, in advance of any joint plenary debate, can I propose that research is undertaken on the extent to which government bodies in all jurisdictions are employing renewable technologies. Agreed. Okay, supported legislation, refer members to Land Registry Fees Order NI 2014. Pages 73 to 86. The SIR has been laid in the Business Office by DFP for formal consideration and subject to affirmative resolution. On 14th May, the committee was briefed by officials on the initial proposal and was content with the proposal. Due to the bank holiday and the committee packs being sent out early, it was not possible to include the Examiner Statutory Rules report, which covers this SR. However, the examiner has written to the committee stating he will be raising no points about the order by way of technical scrutiny and will be listing it in the appendix of his next report. Copy of this is at page 87. And also can inform members DFP officials are on hand today to address any further questions if necessary, though I can't see them. They must be invisible. Any questions from members, or are members still content to agree to this?
Chair, there's only one thing that occurred to me, just without doing all the calculations. Is there a particular percentage here applied?
No, it doesn't appear to be.
What's the logic of it then?
Sure, I don't have the answer to that, so this is unavailable.
You think a point, if it's a percentage, you can say it's inflation or whatever else, in real term, but if it's all over the place, which it does seem to be, I just wonder how they work that out.
Oh, with the department and that, Chair, but if the committee's content to agree it in terms of...
Yeah, because it's going
take the information,
yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's one there that's anything over 250,000. There's just one blank fee, so it could be up to 3 million. And you're still.
Well, that's the maximum. But
yeah, that's all they're doing.
Okay. Members content with the question that committee has considered the Land Registry Fees Order NI 2014 recommends it be affirmed by the Assembly. Agreed. Correspondence.
Chair, there's just 3 items of correspondence to draw members' attention to. First item's at page 93 of the pack. It came from Leslie. It's an issue in relation to equal pay, NIO, PSNI. It seems to be related to the NIO, PSNI equal pay grievance. So, page 93.
Yeah, Chair, I got that. The intriguing thing was that it talks about a new offer you'll see there. 3 paragraphs in the bottom. Finance Minister has now issued a compromise offer for equal pay. Don't think we're aware of that there, but I would propose that the DFP be asked if this could be addressed as part of the Minister's recommendation for resolving this ongoing thing between PSNI and NIO, and if not, what the position is on the matter. So in fact we're able to answer these sort of questions.
Yeah, I think, is it not Ministers put forward proposals to the Executive, but I don't know whether the Executive
passed them,
whether they passed them or not.
Members content with that approach?
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Then on page 96, there's a correspondence from Oldwood Chamber of Commerce regarding small business rates relief. The Chamber's keen to present to the committee on this issue, Chair, if members are content to take a briefing.
Members agree to that?
Yeah.
And finally, page 98, the Payments Council is providing the committee with an update report on the current account switch service. This is for customers and businesses to make it more easily for them to switch between bank accounts. So the council's offering an oral briefing if the committee's interested in having that scheduled into the work programme.
Great.
Okay.
It's information, yeah.
So correspondence.
Okay, members, draft work programme, pages 103 to 106. Members agreed to scheduling the briefings there. Members content work programmes updated, reflect agreements made today.
Yes.
Any other business can advise members the 2014 survey of services is now underway, and it's important that all members reflect on the services provided by the Assembly Commission and respond to the survey. The closing date for the survey is 6th June. That's been posted out, has it? Distributed to members. Okay, and then the next meeting will be Wednesday, 4th of June at 10 a.m.
Committee room 30.